This chess set belonged to a mentor of mine before he passed away when I was in high school. And I still keep it around to remind me of the man that he was and of the man that I'd like to be. 2 years ago, I started taking chess a lot more seriously. I started playing every single day. I was on my phone playing every single day. I was trying to play over the board as much as I could with people. And I'm rated 1200 right now. My peak is like 1300 ELO. It's nothing incredibly impressive. If you know chess, that's not that great. It's better than the average Joe, but definitely not competitive. However, the climb from 500 ELO to 1200 ELO taught me more about life and business than anything else that I've ever done. So I'm gonna share the 4 things that chess has taught me about life and business, and I hope this helps you as well, whether in chess or in your life and business. Let's get into it. Lesson 1, if something's not working, doing it harder doesn't fix it. So I got stuck in the 500s for about 6 months. If you don't know about the ratings in chess, 100 to 500 is about where everybody starts. It's your rating of how good you are compared to everybody else. The scale obviously goes from 0, but most people are within 100 to 500, and it goes all the way up to 3,200 technically. And when I was stuck in those 500s, every single game felt like I was making the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. And when you're in those 500s, you typically equate chess with intelligence, where what you need to learn during that time is that it's actually pattern recognition. It's not just intelligence. People think it's this raw battle of the minds. If my mind is smarter, then I'll beat my opponent naturally. But really, it's just I've memorized the patterns of what you're trying to do. Chess has been solved. So I've just memorized the patterns and I beat you because I saw the patterns better than you did. Or in the 500s case, my opponents didn't even know the patterns. So in my case, my move was to play more games in the beginning, and it obviously did not work. I would win 5, lose 5, win 10, lose 10. I'd get all the way up to 900 and then go all the way down to 350. What broke me out was not more games, it was actually studying. So I got the Capablanca book on fundamentals of chess, and in it, I learned about a lot of things, but the biggest thing that helped me during that was endgame theory. Because what I found was that my opponents were never used to getting to the endgame of chess. The endgame of chess is where like most of the pieces are gone and you're just trying to like finagle each other and win. And most of them were doing these fast blitz to win in 5 moves every single time, but you got them past move 15, move 20, and they were all a fish out of water. Learning endgame was huge. So then I thought, okay, if I can just get them into the middle game and the end game, if I can get them to delay just a little bit longer, I could kick their butt. And so what I did was I learned 2 openings. I learned the London system and the Queen's Gambit. And I still do this to this day. If you ever play me, you can kick my butt every time because I always do this. Typically when people start, they'll play the king's pawn. They'll play e4. Typically when they start, they play king's pawn, they play e4, and then the other person responds with king pawn, e4, and then they build their board. However, Queen's Gambit takes her pawn and moves it up, d4. And typically what happens is they, in turn, will respond with their pawn on d5, and then you sacrifice your pawn on c4. And here was my philosophy. If the person accepted it, I would do Queen's Gambit. If the person fought back and said, okay, great, I'm gonna do this or whatever, if they started doing their own thing, I would do the London system. So for Queen's Gambit, if you've seen the show on Netflix, Queen's Gambit, here's how it works. Their pawn takes, then I immediately threaten their pawn with this bishop right here. So this bishop is threatening to take. So their pawn comes here to defend. Then I bring out my pawn to attack this guy, and if he takes, then my queen comes in and attacks. It's just inconvenient for him, so he's not going to, typically they're not going to do that. They're going to bring this to defend. Then I'm going to sacrifice my second piece, my pawn here, and I'm going to take his guy, and he's going to take that guy, okay? So now he's still up a piece. I look like I'm down, and I'm going to bring the queen out right here. And then what's happening? Queenie is looking right at the rook over in the corner, and there's really no way to save it for the most part. Like you could try to block it with your knight, and poof, I come in and I take it. You're in check, so you have to block with maybe your bishop or something like that. I think the knight is the best way out of the whole entire thing, is right there, but it's still a mess. When I'm there, most people what they do is they will try to block with like the bishop. Then I take. Then they move the knight around, and then I take the pawn and all of that. It just wrecks them, if they accept the Queen's Gambit. If they don't, I do the London system, which is a different thing altogether. London system would be that I would set up like this, and then I usually do this, which is a variant. on the London system. It's called the Jabava variant on the London. It's actually kind of cool because it works all your pieces over to one side, expecting your opponent to castle. Anyway, whatever. That's the nerdy side. What did this teach me? What would happen is my opponents wouldn't have their sneaky little openings anymore, and I'd be able to work them into the endgame, and I knew all the theory. I knew a bunch of tactics, and I knew endgame theory, so it was way easier for me to absolutely wreck them. I went from 500 to 1200 in like 2 days because of learning that stuff. So the business version of this is everywhere. When something's stuck, your instinct is just to keep doing more of what you've been doing, but harder, because you will look at your business or at your life as, oh my gosh, it's a battle of my mind. It's a battle of, am I smart enough? It's a battle of, am I good enough? When in actuality, you just haven't studied. You just haven't learned the new thing. Instead of objectively looking at what you're struggling with and then saying, oh yeah, I just don't know that thing yet. Okay, let's go. Let's learn that thing. Let's try something new. Instead, what most people say is, I'm not good enough. Oh, this validates that I'm a piece of crap. I don't know what I'm doing. Instead of just pushing through and trying something new or learning or studying. And that gung-ho-ness of, I gotta just push through and do the same thing over and over again, just about never works. The big unlock for me was I was studying our industry, and I was seeing that all the other agencies were heavily focused on marketing and sales. They're heavily focused on how do I get new clients, how do I get new clients. But some of our competition was not focused on how do I retain. And because of it, some of those agencies were getting bad names, and I was seeing the bubbles coming up of people not liking them. And I said, what if we focused heavily on retention and then got really good at the marketing and sales side? And we did that. And that was, I believe, what allowed us to scale up to $1 million plus. So if you are stuck, the answer might not be doing more of the thing that's not working. It might be studying the part of the game that your competition's actually ignoring. Lesson number 2 is winning tempo. So actually, let's flip the board for this one. There we go. So let's say my opponent goes first this time, and they move e4, e5, e4, e4, e5, and then let's say my opponent brings their queen right out because they're trying to whatever. I don't know what they're trying to do here. However, what I'm going to do is attack their queen with my bishop. My bishop is now threatening to take their queen. Now that my bishop is threatening that, their queen cannot go here, she'll be taken, here she'll be taken, here she'll be taken, here she'll be taken. She could probably go here, but then I'm just gonna do this and this. There's a lot of things I could do to kind of mess with her at that point. The best move she can do here is just to go all the way back. And now I'm in a position where I have more moves on the board that have progressed me than my opponent does. This is significant because now I have one tempo against my opponent. Essentially, I've earned an extra move by threatening that person's queen. And now they're kind of stuck in like, oh my gosh, now I gotta make more moves to try to counteract against yours. Winning tempo is when you make a move that requires your opponent to move twice to get out of it. And when you do that, you win speed in the game. Winning tempo has been one of the biggest concepts that has helped me dramatically in business, and it was like a huge unlock for us. For example, a few years ago, I had a client who was just eating me alive. It was somebody that the scope creep was out of control. I was this person's like personal assistant at some point. It was embarrassing how out of control the situation was. This client was paying me probably some of the least money of any other client. And on top of that, they were taking up all of my mental bandwidth. And so I could not think about growing our business because this person had my number. They were living rent-free in my head at all times, which was reactive. Our company wasn't moving forward, and I was spending time on something that wasn't even gonna make things better, even if I got it perfect. Even if I got it perfect. The proactive thing that I should have done was focusing on our sales at the time, focusing on learning how to follow up well, focusing on learning how to follow up and get good leads from the other side of our business. I was so heavily focused on this one person that was distracting me when I was hitting the deliverables for that person that I was losing sight of growing our own company. So choosing to flip in that case and allow our team to handle the client while I went and focused a little bit more on sales and marketing allowed our company to move forward and won me tempo, where it was the equivalent of 2 moves rather than just the one. There's a great book by Gary Keller called The One Thing, where in it, he poses a primary question. I'm gonna spoil the whole book for you. The book is this question: what's the one thing you can do today that by doing so, everything else will become easier or unnecessary altogether? And that's been a huge phrase that I've tried to live my life by, but winning tempo kind of just re-solidified that for me. Big disclaimer too, by the way, winning tempo is not about working faster. It's about choosing the move that puts you ahead rather than sticking with the move that keeps you even. Lesson 3, you don't have to respond just because they moved. For example, let's say in this position, my opponent makes a threat. They're threatening this little guy right here. He's fully protected. And the reality of if they take and then they take and then his queen comes in and takes, maybe my king ends up getting in trouble. What do I do then? I can do this. I can just put my knight right here, which is going to take care of him. And then what? He moves here, they win a little bit of tempo. Now they're making a threat to my knight, and I can move the knight around or whatever. I don't have to respond to this threat. You do not have to negotiate with terrorists, okay? If somebody makes a threat to your piece, if you know you're covered, you don't have to let the cortisol of the moment force you to make your decision. This is a great thing in chess. You do not have to trade every single time somebody tries to offer you a piece, because they might be offering you a piece so they can get ahead. We had a client recently. Everything was always on fire for this client. Nothing was ever really good enough, and we didn't know how to make them happy. And at some point, I had account managers and team members that this client was taking up 30% of their time, 20% of their time, and our team was miserable. And they would tell me, hey, this is really hard, Jared. And I would say, okay, well, we just gotta. And I was making our team reactive. I was like, oh yeah, just respond to what they're doing. And it was hurting them. Their morale was down. We were taking so much time for this client that really was not a good fit. And then I had a realization. We were stressing about things that we weren't even contracted for with this client, trying to make their business work for them when really they just didn't know how to run their business. So we fired them. We let them go. We said, hey, we don't think we're a good fit for you anymore. We're going to give you all your stuff so that you own it. We just don't think we're a good fit, and we want to end this contract. Their fire was not our fire. And me handling that wasn't me getting mad at the client and me getting cold and bitter and angry at them. Me handling that was me protecting our team and making sure that they were able to do what they needed to do in order to progress forward. We delivered our work exceptionally. We did exactly what we were contracted for. And if that's not good enough for the client, that's okay. That's okay, because we did the things that they paid us to do. Sometimes in business or in life, somebody might buy something from you thinking that you're going to solve a lot more in their business than they're paying you to solve. And that's okay. In chess, beginners think that every single threat deserves a response. And that's not the case. If you can keep a level head and focus on what's important and what's next for you, and knowing what's important and what's next for you, you're gonna win. So once me and our team stopped reacting to every fire that our clients lit, we had room to actually look at our whole company. And that's when we started growing. Last, fourth and final lesson, you've got to get a peer. I was lecturing at this event in Philadelphia, and I met Joe. Joe became one of my best buddies super fast. We just got along. It was just love at first sight, he and I. Every joke lined up. It was awesome. And while we were there, he was like, oh, hold on. And he was finishing a chess game or something like that. I was like, you play chess? And he goes, yeah, dude, I play multiple times a day. And all of a sudden, me and Joe got each other's numbers. We were texting every day about chess. We were texting each other positions that we were in chess. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I fell for this. Or look at this game, I crushed this. We were just arm in arm in this thing, growing together and showing each other all of our games and stuff. And something changed when that happened for me. I started studying more because my peer was firing me up. And I wanted to come to our next conversations with interesting things. I wanted to perform well so I could send my buddy a screenshot of something cool that I did. I wanted to beat him and he wanted to beat me. Neither of us were ever going to be the next Bobby Fischer or Magnus Carlsen, but we were both going to get better than we were last week, and we were going to do that together. Having a peer fired me up in a way that studying alone never really did. And the same thing is true in business. The absolute biggest jumps that I've ever made in my career and in my agency is when I had an actual peer firing me up that I could align with. Not a mentor that was 45 steps ahead of me, and not a mentee that was significantly behind me, but a true peer that I could see eye to eye with. Mary Robb was that person for me. She owns a really cool agency called Social Practice. It's a social media management agency for aesthetic medicine. And we are a web and SEO agency for aesthetic medicine. And our businesses were roughly the same age when we met. Hers was dramatically ahead of ours. And getting to talk to Mary on a regular basis all of a sudden had me just fired up of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna work on this next. And I helped her in her career too, because I was doing really well in this public speaking side. So I was helping her get a little bit more into that. And she's helping me get into ops and business management and how I can actually scale. It was this electric, like fired up, actual peer eye to eye relationship that I truthfully hadn't had in my entire career, let alone owning a business. We would talk through real data, real numbers of what we were going through, actual client situations of what we were trying to figure out, real decisions on our staff, real decisions on corporate structure. And I got better because she was better. And I'd like to think that it's mutual. Additionally, the same thing happened when I got into creative agency groups, where I started networking with other people who owned creative agencies like ours and got spurred on by them. I would see ones that were at 10 million or 15 million and be like, oh my gosh, how can I ever get there? Or I would maybe see some that were a little bit further behind, or some that were neck and neck with us that I could hopefully resonate with and learn a thing or two from. And I shot up like a rocket once I had peers all around me. And a peer is somebody who is playing the same game as you at roughly the same level and with the same seriousness. The peers that I've struggled with are the ones that like are kicking it around, and I'm fired up and I'm telling them, let's do this, let's go. And they are wishy-washy, you know? So it's hard for me to be challenged in that friendship or that peership. It's an extremely different relationship than you would have with a mentor or a coach or a client. It does something to you and for you that nothing else can. So if you look at like those first 3 lessons, it's really about one thing. Who's in charge here? Who's running this game? When you're stuck and you grind harder, the game is in charge of you, right? You are at the mercy of everybody around you. When you spend your day agonizing over the most recent client problem, the game is running you. And when every fire that your client lights automatically becomes your fire, the game is running you. Chess didn't teach me how to be smarter than anybody else. I'm 1200. I'm not that great, okay? What it taught me is that running your own game does not require that you're smarter. It requires that you take ownership over progression. And the 4th lesson, Joe, Mary, the agency groups, that lesson taught me something different. It taught me that you don't have to run the game alone. And the people who shoot up like rockets always have someone next to them doing the same thing. So no, I'm not a great chess player, but I'm a much better business owner because of what this climb has taught me. And I'm grateful for the people who have climbed with me.